Hello, I'm Marthi Venkatesh Mannar. That's my full name. I was known in the campus as Venki or Venki Mannar, and I graduated in chemical engineering, B.Tech, 1970. In those days, it was a 5-year program. So I was at the institute from 1965 to 70. And last year, we celebrated our golden jubilee of my batch at the institute. And that's where we are today. At the institute itself, I think many fond memories. I think, first of all, starting with my own peer group, just my batch, they were the best and brightest from across the country, articulate, talented, passionate. They would stand no nonsense. Many of us came from our schools being the top of our classes, and here was everyone was topper in their respective classes or schools. So, yeah, and also at that time, and I don't know how it is today, we had a cross section across the country. So I have classmates from virtually every corner of the country, and so that for the first time opened my awareness to a kind of a pan India level and a glimpse of the world beyond. And many of my classmates came from public schools, and they got a lot of that kind of perspective. And so that was great. And interesting thing is that for all these years, I'm still in touch with so many of them. Another favorite memory I have is the opportunity to participate in a whole range of extracurricular activities. I mean, beyond the rigorous work of the institute itself, which was quite demanding, I'm sure it is equally today. I was particularly interested in debates, quizzes, group discussions. I was editor of Campus Times, which was a magazine in those days. And so as part of that, I had a unique opportunity. I was a 17 or 18-year-old, and here I was trooping up to meet and interview luminaries like C.V. Raman, Vikram Sarabhai, Nayantara Sehgal, J. Krishnamurti, Mahesh Yogi. I've interviewed all these people and met them face to face and talked to them, which is really great. As running the campus newspaper, we were given a remarkable latitude in terms of what we could write in the newspaper. There was no editorial oversight from any of the faculty. So we just wrote, and we had a lot of fun doing that. And so that was another memory. And last but not least, we used to enjoy all the cultural events on campus, and the cultural week, which I understand still continues. And that was our opportunity to meet with anybody from outside the campus. Otherwise, we were pretty isolated. And there were very few girls in the institute. So it was an opportunity at least to meet somebody from the opposite sex, and participate in events together. And that was great as well. If you ask me about my favorite spot at IIT Madras, and I think you get a uniform response that it's the open air theater. And the many movies, the shows, the events we have enjoyed at the open air theater, they must be running into hundreds. And in those days, thanks to the strong German collaboration, we used to get a number of German shows and bands and jazz. That was my first introduction to jazz, coming in and performing at the OAT. And in fact, last year when my batch had its Golden Jubilee reunion, we all uniformly voted that we should have a photograph taken at OAT. So all of us trooped to the OAT in the middle of the day with our spouses, and we had a picture taken there. So that's a great memory. I think, first of all, in terms of getting into IIT in those days, it was much simpler than it is today, And of course, I was acquainted because my brother was already in institute, 3 years my senior. And so he had filled me in, and I was very excited. And in those days, even the entrance exam was pretty informal. A bunch of my classmates in PUC wrote it. And then when we heard that the results were up, I remember all of us casually just biked to the institute, 5 of us, and lo and behold, all 5 of us were on the list. So it was quite casual, and the way we got in, it was just something that we assumed would happen, and it just happened like that. It's quite remarkable, and when I reflect on it, the fact that all of us spent 5 years of our lives 50 years ago. I was there from age 16 to age 21 or 20, yeah, and that was 50 years ago. the fact that those 5 years could have shaped and molded what I am today, I still find it hard to believe, but it's really a fact. I mean, and I'm sure you might hear it from others as well. Those 5 years have impacted us in ways that have really shaped our lives and our careers. And one can't really explain why, but I guess it was those formative years, but it was also everything else that was happening there that helped us. And if I think of a couple of specific ways in which they have impacted, first is given the heavy load of information that was being fed to us, and we were forced to digest and be examined on that, the ability to absorb key pieces of knowledge across a range of disciplines. I think that is something I really picked up at IIT, and that has helped me all these years and continues to help me today. And next to that, not just absorbing it and retaining it, but also the ability to identify, access, and apply information. And those are the days when there was no Google search, nothing. Of course, over the years, we've honed our own skills, but that ability to determine the information that you need and try to access it. And that's something I think I really learned there. Over the years, over my career, as I moved to work as a head of a non-profit organization, working with people across many UN organizations, many countries, many disciplines, the IIT trait of being receptive to new ideas, I think, has stayed with me. And I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly applying the practices I come across even to today. So I credit all of this to the IIT influence for all of this to happen. And last but not least, the ability to take risks, make mid-career changes that have really enhanced, I think, my work and all that I've done. I come from a family of salt producers. My family has been in the salt business for 6 generations from the mid 19th century. So my father was very much in the salt industry. And in fact, the whole idea was that I do chemical engineering. My father was not an engineer. He said that you come back and you gain the technical expertise to convert this salt production, which was a kind of a semi-agricultural operation, into something much more technically sound and more modern. And that was the whole idea. I came to Northwestern, did my master's, and then I worked in a salt company for almost a year just to pick up some of the latest principles of salt production. And that's when I returned to India to work with my father to set up another salt, in a much larger and more modern salt industry, and bring some of those principles to India. In fact, I would say, although I can't take full credit for it, that marked the introduction and modernization of the salt industry in India. Actually, so many of the things that I brought back have reshaped the whole industry over the past 20 or 30 years. The Indian salt industry has really modernized and come on par with some of the global practices. Okay, these are all things of chance that happen. I was in the salt business, and it was focused on producing more salt and selling more salt, getting a better price, making profits. Till one day I was on a domestic flight and sitting next to an American who was working in the development sector. And he told me, and then we started talking, and I said, I work in the salt sector. And he said, you're the person I want to really meet, because I have this plan to introduce nutrients through salt. And he said, I want to work with a salt manufacturer who has a technical background, who can help me do this. And can you imagine? That's where it all started. We came back, and I started working on addition of calcium and iron and other nutrients to salt. And then I was also kind of, for the first time, it dawned on me that something as simple as salt, which every household consumes, everybody consumes in roughly the same quantities every day, could act as a vehicle for nutrients that they're unable to get through the diet. In the West, or in a more affluent society, you can eat a variety of foods, you can eat meats and fish, and get access to a number of nutrients. But in a poor country where limited access, economically, very disadvantaged, how do you make sure that people get these essential nutrients? And that's when I felt that the role of salt is something phenomenal. And then I started working more and more in iodization of salt, today I continue to work because I moved to Toronto. I work as an adjunct professor at the University of Toronto. So where this research is continuing, and even as we speak, we are doing a lot of expanded work in salt fortification with a number of nutrients. And the other aspect I do is I spend half my time in India. This was before COVID started, to try and take some of the lab work that we've done here to scale in India. And we have expanded many of our programs in India to a very large level. So that's the exciting part I'm doing, that I'm able to translate some of the very good research that we're able to do here. And here I have access, I guess I could do something in India, but I have access to a huge group of highly competent technical people across many disciplines. And I'm able to draw on their expertise and then do the work here and apply it in India. Small actions can make a very big difference. We were doing a large program on iodization in China in the late 80s. That was when China was just beginning to come out. And China had a very high level of iodine deficiency and very low rates of iodization. The industry was quite poorly organized. It was something like India at that time. And I was invited by the World Bank to come and do a study of the Chinese salt industry and come up with recommendations to develop universal iodization of salt. And the World Bank was working with the Chinese government, a huge program, at that time, hundreds of millions of dollars. And I did all that. I did my final report. And the World Bank head in Beijing said, you have to meet, most of the decisions in China these days are being made by the finance ministry, and you will have to meet the finance minister. He was a man called Zhu Rongji, who later on became the prime minister, actually. And so I was given 15 minutes in his office and to talk about this. So with some of my medical colleagues, we met him, and he was, to start with, he's not that interested in what's his salt, and he's so busy with so many other things. At some point, a colleague of mine who was a top endocrinologist, he said, Mr. Finance Minister, let me tell you that the lack of iodine in the Chinese population is causing a deficit of 13 to 14 IQ points per child. And you have the one child policy, and can you imagine that if all your children of these generations are deprived of that level of IQ, how are you going to compete in the world, and how are you going to become an economic and a world power? And that was when his interest was thing. Our 15 minutes became half an hour and longer, and then he wanted to know more details and the link between iodine and mental development. And then we left. And believe it or not, within 3 months, orders had gone out, and you know how things go in China, to that all salt in the country shall be iodized. And when I visited, and I was involved with the program for the next couple of years, in 2 years, they had reached 95% of all salt iodized. And that continues to today. So I'm saying that how a small conversation with somebody who really, makes the difference can tip off something very big. Over the past 20, 30 years, I must say, since I started working actively in nutrition, there's been a huge change. Earlier, nutrition was not given a very high priority, and it was not a big deal. Or what people ate, the foods did not matter that much. There was much less knowledge available, and all of that has changed. I think huge change, and to a point where governments, and even I would say in India, there's been a much greater awareness of the importance of good nutrition, eating good foods, healthy foods and safe foods. The Food Standards and Safety Authority in India, for example, I've seen them grow over the past 10 years. They are very, very up to date, and they're taking a number of good decisions. So I would say there's much greater awareness today. It was prompted by international action and UN agencies working in India, advising the government of India and all that. But I think a country like India has moved beyond that now. India is very much, it's on its own, it's got its own experts. So there's a lot of work going on, but the huge challenges in India. And again, we are hit by something like COVID, which again accentuates the need for good nutrition. And we know that malnutrition is a huge factor in the intensity of COVID, affecting any person. And the more malnourished a person, the more the risk of very serious complications. So again, it's coming back to the importance of basic good health and nutrition. And so it is happening. Much more needs to be done. About 7 or 8 years back, I was appointed as an officer of the Order of Canada. It's called OC, order. It's given by the Governor General. It's the highest civilian recognition in the country. So it's the equivalent of, say, Padma Vibhushan, and it's given only to select maybe 10 or 20 in a year. So maybe in Canada over the past 50 years, they might have given 5,000. That's all. So I was given that. So I'm one of the few, I think I would say, non-white Canadians on that list. And in fact, when I went for that ceremony, I recall sitting to my right was the Chief Justice of the Canadian Supreme Court, who was also being honored with that. And on my left was the former Deputy Prime Minister. So that was the level at which they were giving it. So I was happy that they recognized my work, and they gave me that degree. And the following year, the University of Toronto gave me an honorary Doctor of Science. And but of course, the honor that I cherish the most today is still the Distinguished Alumnus Award. I think from IIT Madras, especially when DC gave me the figures that there are less than 200 awardees out of a total graduating class of what, 50, 60,000. So that I think is very, very special. And just in terms of all my own life lessons that I've learned, a couple of things. I just mentioned a couple of thoughts that I have, advising those who are graduating and or planning their careers, to say that there's no predetermined career path for anyone, right? So you can, and as you say, increasingly there are so many options today. You can mix and match your skill sets, and there are no rules requiring that you stay on one particular path. Like you train to be a mechanical engineer, you don't have to be a mechanical engineer, right? You can do a million other things. And so it's important to always to be prepared to be able to expand from your core skills, whatever you pick up, even in a place like IIT, and be prepared for your career trajectory to go off the beaten track. I mean, we should be open to that. And that's something I've really, for example, my own personal experience to move from chemical engineering to nutrition to health. And now I work a lot in agricultural science. So that transformation, people should be open to that. The fact that you could start at some point, and IIT has provided a foundation and a base that I still value, and that has enabled me to move off in so many directions. And that's why I think all graduates from IIT have this tremendous foundation that they've acquired, and they can take it in any direction. So I think they should be willing to seize opportunities as they arise, willing to make mid-course corrections, and then you can see what will happen. Because that's why we've seen all IITians around the world doing so many great things, because they've gone off in so many different directions. I have, right here, around the corner is my colleague Prem Vatsa, who's achieved, he's one of the most successful businessmen in Canada, lives around the block here. And look at what he's done, and he started off by just coming to Canada as a poor graduate student. And this is what we have today. And the other thing I'd like to say is the ability to work with people from different disciplines and backgrounds. And my own experience, again, working with medical doctors and working with nutritionists and agricultural scientists, has taught me that you should be willing to speak. You should not say, I'm an engineer, I do only engineering things. You should be willing to open out and be able to communicate with these people who talk in a very different kind of mindset. And that's important. And the other thing is, of course, just given the world today, there are no geographic boundaries where you can work or how you work. You can even work from India and do something abroad. And many people are willing to do that, beginning to do that. So just to be open to all of this. And I think the other big thing I would say is beyond the technology, it's the ability to work with governments, with other organizations to make things happen. And that's purely from my own experience. many of the challenges often lie in developing and applying very simple technologies, and that brings me back to my own engineering roots. The fact that you can take simple technologies and scale them up and apply them and expand them in a much broader way. So I think that, and the more I work across Canada and now India, I know I'm upbeat about India. I think India's got many of the a lot of potential to do great things, and a lot of things are happening. And you just hear of what's coming out from a place like IIT every month. The new knowledge and expertise that's coming out is tremendous, and that is the thing. If we can grow these centers of excellence like IIT across India, and as places like IIT move out of the campus, and you are beginning to actually go out and solve problems of the day. You're actively involved in addressing the problem of COVID, right, in terms of supporting the management of the COVID pandemic, and the database and everything that goes with it, the technology that goes with solutions, treatment, and diagnosis. So all of this are very important, and I think this is the mindset that anybody leaving the campus should have, to be open and to say that there's no limit to how far you can take your knowledge, expand and apply it, and achieve great things.